So let's take a closer look at Activesync and mobile device management in Exchange Server 2013. To start with, I'm logged on to my Exchange Admin Center and I'm just looking at this list of mailboxes here in the recipient's view. Now if you highlight any of these mailbox users and look over here to the right, you'll see there's this mobile devices section here. There's a few options we can do. For example, we can disable Exchange Activesync. So that would disable that protocol completely for that mailbox, preventing them from using any mobile devices at all. But as we said earlier, that is enabled by default. We can also click on this View Details link here. This shows us the mobile device mailbox policy that's assigned to this mailbox user. So there can be different policies that are assigned to different mailbox users. And if there were any mobile device associations already in existence, they would be listed here, but there's none here at this time. Now, whether you have a mobile device available for testing or not, one of the best ways to actually test your Activesync configuration is to use the Microsoft Remote Connectivity Analyzer, which you can do through a web browser. So we'll cancel out of that. I'll just get another tab going here and we go to the ExRCA.com website. Now, as you can see, there's quite a lot of different tests we can do here. What we're interested in doing is this Exchange Activesync test. Now, I'm going to allow the connectivity analyzer to use auto-discover to detect my server settings. If for some reason you're having DNS issues or you weren't able to use auto-discover, or in the real world, if your company had some objection to publishing auto-discover to the outside world, you can also manually specify the server settings here. So in here you would put the URL or the DNS name for your Activesync virtual directory. So that would be the one that you see configured on the virtual directory on the server. I'll just bring that up very quickly. Here's the auto-discover and here is the Activesync virtual directory. You can see that mail.exchangebootcamp.com is my internal and external URL. So if auto-discover wasn't working, I could just put that URL into the connectivity analyzer. Let's just jump back here, but I'm going to use auto-discover. And we can type in the email address of one of the mailbox users in our organization. As a test lab, this is fine. You can use any of the mailbox users that you have within your test lab environment. In the real world, I strongly recommend that you create a separate mailbox whenever you're using this tool and just leave it disabled and only enable it when you need to run this connectivity analyzer. This is a Microsoft hosted tool, but even still, it is generally recommended that you don't put any real user credentials into this website. You also need to provide authentication so that the auto-discover details can be retrieved. Because I'm using a SSL certificate that was been issued by my own private CA, I'm going to have to tick this box here to ignore trust for SSL. So this is only an issue if the connectivity analyzer is going to hit your SSL certificate and won't be able to trust it, so you can tell it just to ignore that issue. This would also work if you had a self-signed certificate. You need to tick a box here to say you understand that they must use the credentials you provided. So again, just reiterating that point that you should not provide any real user credentials if you're using this tool in the real world. And we also just have to complete this CAPTCHA. And once you've verified that, you get about 30 minutes before you have to do another one. So we'll just go ahead and perform the test. That test shouldn't take too long, maybe 30 or 60 seconds. If your server is particularly slow or there's some issue with your internet connection, it may take longer. And we get this summary basically that says connectivity test was successful. And there's a lot more detail to be seen if we expand this report, and if I expand all of it, you can see quite a lot of detail there. So let's have a look at what actually took place. The first test step is to attempt auto-discover. It tells me that auto-discover was successful, and also tells you each of the potential auto-discover URLs that it tried. So first it just tries the domain name itself to see if it can find an auto-discover virtual directory. That failed in my case, which is fine, even though it was able to resolve it in DNS and port 443 was open. Ran into some SSL certificate issues. What's actually happened there is it's probably hit the web server that's hosting the public website for that domain, rather than actually go to the Exchange server itself. So it's not uncommon to see this first auto-discover test fail. We see then it also tries the autodiscover.exchangebootcamp.com URL, and that test was successful. So that name is resolvable in my public DNS. It points to my public IP address. Which we can see there. Found that port 443 was open. SSL checks passed. Some IIS configuration checks. The auto-discover post requests was successful. And then we get into the actual Exchange Activesync settings. So from that auto-discover request, the URL for my Activesync virtual directory was returned, mail.exchangebootcamp.com/Microsoft Server Activesync. It was then able to resolve that name in DNS. Same IP address in my case, although in the real world that could be a different public IP address. Again, port 443 was open, the SSL check passed. I'll just collapse a few of those steps there. HTTP authentication, and then an Activesync session is being attempted with the server. And we see some actual Activesync commands, folder sync, those sort of things. Okay, you can see it does a little bit of stuff there to simulate what a mobile device might do once it's actually connected to the mailbox. And effectively everything passed. So that's a good result. But you can also see that if there was an issue, say for example I had a problem with my DNS records or my firewall or something else with my authentication settings, all of that detail that's returned in that test report would be very, very helpful for troubleshooting those issues. So I certainly recommend that whenever you're setting up Activesync or troubleshooting Activesync, go to the remote connectivity analyzer and run the Activesync test, and that should very quickly help you to narrow down the root cause of your issue.